Hey everyone, and welcome to WittCode, where in this video we're going to learn how to create a project that uses Eslint and configure Eslint with the eslintrc file. So what is Eslint? Well, Eslint is a tool that analyzes JavaScript code for problems, whether it be code quality or style issues. It does this by following a set of configurable and customizable rules defined inside a file called eslintrc. Eslintrc is the configuration file for Eslint. This file tells Eslint what to look for and enforce in JavaScript code. So to begin, let's first initialize a project as an ES6 project by using npm init es6-y. This creates a package.json with the type set to module. And now let's create a source folder to hold our source code, and inside here an index.js file. And now inside this index.js file, let's just add some simple code in here that we will go over. So it's essentially just two variables, one called hello, one called long line. And so something we could use with Eslint here is we could make it so that single quotes need to be used everywhere as opposed to double. And maybe we could also set a limit on how long a line of code can be before it has to be broken down. But before we get more into this, let's install and configure Eslint. So Eslint is simply a package called Eslint, and we'll install it as a development dependency with -d as it's used for developing an application. Now we can easily set up an Eslint configuration file by running the command npm init and then @eslint-config. So this command here, what it does is it creates the eslintrc file to configure Eslint. And now let's just go through these options, and basically each option we choose will dictate the outcome of our Eslint configuration file. So what we want to do is check syntax, find problems, and enforce code style. We are using JavaScript modules, import and export. We're not using any frameworks for this. We're not using TypeScript. And our code runs, for this, let's just say it runs in the browser only. And then let's answer some questions. And we want our config file to be in JavaScript. We use spaces and we use single quotes. And for me, it's Unix because I'm a Mac. And do we require semicolons? We'll say yes. And so what we can see is this has created an eslintrc file, specifically with the extension .cjs, because it's using common.js module.exports, because you can see in here we set the type to be module. And so to use module.exports, we need to specify this as a common.js file. But nevertheless, after doing this, we can see already some errors appearing here that Eslint has figured out. And this is actually showing up for me in here because I have the extension, the Eslint extension installed. If we go to here, this one right here is what points everything out inside the code editor. Whereas if you don't have that installed, we can still see what Eslint finds by running Eslint against our project. And to do that, let's create a script, which we will call lint. And what it simply does is we just run Eslint against our source folder. So now if we run npm run lint, we can see hello is assigned never used, long lines assigned never used, strings must be semicolons, or strings must be single quote, and some missing semicolons, which is all these errors that are being pointed out here. So now let's start talking about this eslintrc file. So this file here exports an object that is used to configure Eslint. Each key and property in this file tells Eslint what the syntax and style of our code should be. The rules key, so the rules key right here, contains an object where each key is an Eslint rule. So for example, here we have 4 rules. We have indent, line break style, quotes, and semi. Each of these rules here takes an array where the first argument is the error level of the rule. Here, so we can see each one is set to error. So the first argument is error, error, error for all of them, which means if the quality or style is not followed, then it will be an error. And that's why we have error listed out here. If we change this to say warn, and then we rerun Eslint, we get a warning for the missing semicolon. And we can also set it, I believe another one is off. And if we run it again, now we get no problem at all. But if we set this to error, then we can see our 4 errors. And specifically, let's go into each one of these rules. So the line break style enforces consistent line endings. If they aren't Unix or \n, then there will be an error. This semi rule says that we require semicolons at the end of statements. The quotes rule right here says that we require single quotes. And the indent rule enforces the indentation style, in our case, to be spaces. And note also that you can see the name of the rule out here. So quotes comes from here, semi is this here. However, if we look in here, we can see these no unused vars rules, which we aren't actually sure. We don't have that inside our rules here. And where this is coming from is the extends part of our eslintrc file. So we can see here, we have the extends key sent to recommended. And this extends property extends from a set of rule configurations from the value provided to it, which is ESLint recommended, which is basically some base recommended ESLint rules. If we want to overwrite this no unused vars rule, then we can set it to off in the rules section of eslintrc. So we have the rule name here. Now let's go to our rules, find one here, and put this in. Let's see if we rerun our lint configuration, they're no longer there. But I think this is a good one to have because there's not really much point in unused variables. And now let's add a rule not included in this recommended extension. So one we could use, or we're going to use, is called max line, which is in ESLint is just max len like this, and we'll set it to error. And then I believe the next argument is an object with the key code, and we set that to 60. And it said we get invalid rule. Maybe it's the number 60. See if that works. And so because of this rule, let's run this. Now we get a max length. See, this line has a length of 111, which is what's coming from this here. And the maximum allowed is 60, which we specified here. And something different from the rest of these is that the second argument is an object as opposed to just a string or a number. This basically means that the second argument provided to each rule array is dependent on the rule itself. For example, this max length rule takes an object, while the quotes rule just takes the words single, double, or backtick. And one of these properties provided to this max length rule, so there's probably more than this, but we have code here, which enforces the maximum line length and has a default value of 80, I believe. But so all these rules can be found on ESLint's website, along with their different values for the second argument. But next, let's start talking about the ESLint environment. So the behavior of ESLint is also impacted by the env property, which is this up here. If you remember, we were either given the option of browser or node, and the env property defines the environment that the JavaScript code is expected to run in. So here we have it set to browser and ES 2021. This means that ESLint will expect global browser variables and also ECMAScript 2021 variables. For example, if we use the window variable, we won't get any errors because we're expecting in a browser environment. So we can do window dot whatever. But if we use a node global variable, which I think is like just global, I think, it might say global is not defined. So any variable specific to a node environment will be given an error in ESLint. So I think actually a better one to show, let's just set this to node as opposed to browser. And now let's do window.alert, and we can see we get an underline saying window is not defined. And if we run our lint, we also get window is not defined. And this comes from changing this environment. So if we change it back to browser, and then you can see the underline is gone. And if we run this, it's gone from here as well. Next, let's talk about the parser options right here. So the behavior of ESLint is also impacted by this property ParserOptions. And this property enables support for JavaScript language options such as JSX if you're using React. And so here we have the source type set to module, which enables ECMAScript modules or the import or export keyword. The ECMA version key specifies the version of ECMAScript syntax to use. And by default, I believe it's 5, but we have it set to latest. Another key we can talk about is overrides here. And the override section allows us to provide configurations to a specific glob pattern. So here we are saying that the eslintrc.js or .cjs files have the environment set to node and the source type set to script. And this is different from the rest of the ESLint configuration, which has source type set to module. So to further demonstrate, let's create another override for a file called special.js. So we have this configuration object here. Let's create another one in here. And so what we'll give it is the files key, which specifies what this override is for. And it's for any file or the file called special.js. And what we want to do is let's create some rules for it. And let's do quotes. We'll do an error if they are not double. So now let's create inside our source folder special.js, and let's get this, paste this inside here. Definition for rule quotes not found, and I think that's because it's quotes. So we did quote. If we tag on quotes like this, and now we go in here, we can see strings must be double quote, whereas in index.js, they're single quote. And that's because we did a specific override for a file called special.js, which is what Eslint does by default for its own configuration file. And we can check this in the terminal. If we run npm run lint again, we get inside special.js here. So we have our index.js errors, and then we have our special.js errors. But so this is my video basically on showing how to customize Eslint with this .eslintrc file. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I'll try and get back to you. Besides that, I want to thank you for liking and subscribing, and I hope to see you in the next one. Have a good one.